Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the FALCON Oil and Gas Investor Presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. We have received a considerable number of pre-submitted questions, so if we may just ask you to reserve submitting those questions until we've completed a majority of those pre-submitted questions, and then feel free just to type in your question at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, as usual, we'd like to submit the following poll, and I'm sure the company will be most grateful for your participation. I'd now like to hand over to CEO Philip Quigley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and welcome all. We are going to present a short presentation, and then, as Mark said, we're going to jump into a Q&A session. And really, this is a follow-on from our AGM of last week. And for those of you on today, apologies for the communication problems we had last week, completely outside of our control. It was an issue in Canada. So we decided to rerun the presentation and most of the Q&A again for the benefit of those who did attend but couldn't hear, and then for those who weren't able to attend last week. So let me jump into the presentation. It's very short. I'll give you a quick overview of the company. Again, corporate information. We've got 1 billion shares in issue, cash in the bank, which is a very healthy $17 million. Our major shareholders have had one significant change in the last year, and that's the addition of Brian Sheffield coming in at 8.66%. So a welcome, very welcome addition to our share register. And then, as a reminder, what most of this company is about is the Beetaloo. It's a massive 18,000 square kilometers or 4.6 million acres. And we've already had a significant discovery of 6.6 TCF of gross contingent resources. We are, as you know, quoted on Toronto on the TSXV and, of course, in London on the AIM market. So a quick company overview. As I said, very focused on Australia, which is our Beetaloo sub-basin in the Northern Territory, Australia. It does measure, as I said, 4.6 million acres and 6.6 TCF to date already discovered. Our board expertise now has, expertise in over 4,000 unconventional wells, particularly in the addition of Tom Lehman to our board in the last few months, and he's certainly a welcome addition. Our joint venture in the Beetaloo is with Origin Energy and has been since 2014, and they remain as our operator. And unfortunately for us, still are carrying us through the capital expenditure program since way back in 2014 and still continue to carry us through the work we're doing today. And I'll talk a little bit mostly about what this current work program is in terms of the 2022, which is about to kick off very shortly, and obviously the objectives of that as well. So let me jump into what this stage 3 work program looks like. Firstly, we're going to acquire 58 kilometer lines of high-spec 2D seismic in and around the Amungi well lease area. We'll then, in around September, we'll go out to spud our first well on the Amungi pad. So alongside the very successful 2016 well that we went back and retested in September last year, we're going to drill a new 1,000 meter horizontal well there. Then we'll step out 10 kilometers from that pad to a new pad, which is currently the construction of which is being finalized. And we'll spud that second well immediately after the first well has been completed. And then we'll frack both of those wells, about 15 stages per each 1,000 meter horizontal section, and then run those production tests for 90 or maybe 180 days. In addition to that drilling and testing program, we'll obviously do follow-up work on our what we consider a very, very successful Valkyrie exploration well, the Valkyrie 76 that we completed last year. And there's further core and log analysis to go on there. And then finally, our Kayala well, which we're still doing, a lot of work on, where we struggle in terms of getting the well to flow on its own. We did get a decent flow rate at various stages using artificial lift techniques, but there's still, questions to be answered and further work to be done over the course of this year. So just moving on to the objectives of this year's program. Well, the primary objective of drilling these two wells is to, one, obtain flow rates of 2,000 to 3,000 MCF of gas per day for each 1,000 meter lateral. And should we achieve those kind of rates, that would give us the confidence then to move into a multi-well multi-pad pilot development program in 23 and 24. The other objectives of this program is to work on getting our drilling rates down to less than 45 days, to learn more about the natural fracture network and the complexity of it in the Beetaloo. And then, of course, to integrate all our well data, current and future well data, together with the seismic data, to assess merits of future 3D seismic surveys in the Beetaloo, which we'd look to be doing that ahead of doing a multi-well pilot program. Now, in addition to what we are doing, it's also important to remember we're not the only ones in the Beetaloo anymore. We have significant presence from Empire, Tamboran, and Santos. Empire are currently testing over there's a well called the Carpenteria 2H well. They completed the drilling of that last year, and they're now started testing that in terms of hydraulic fracture stimulation of that well started last week. And we'll expect to see results of that test before the end of August. So they're doing I think they're doing 25 stages across that 1,000 meter lateral. So that's pretty exciting because there's a direct read through on the Carpenteria 2H well across to our Valkyrie 76 flank well, very similar in terms of its geological setting, slightly shallower than ours. Ours is about 1,700-1,800 meters. They might be 1,200 or 1,300 meters, but nonetheless a very, very good read through. And then Empire also have plans to drill 2 additional wells, a horizontal well called the Carpenteria 3H and a vertical well, the Carpenteria 4V well. So a lot of activity to go between now and the end of this year. Santos Tamboran, who completed their 2 Tanambarini wells, very successful wells in 2021. What we get up there is an update on what the 300-day flow test might look like, and that could be coming up shortly, which will be of interest to everybody, how that well has worked and flowed over the last 300 days. More interesting, of course, would be Tamboran's own well. They own 100% of the Maverick block area, and they're going to drill that well September, October spud date. Again, a very good well for us too, given its proximity to our Amungi wells and our Valkyrie 76. So a lot of activity going on in the Beetaloo. It's no longer Falcon origin out drilling. We've got a lot of other activity, which will hopefully move this Beetaloo towards declaration of commercial as we head into 23 and 24. So that concludes the presentation. As I said, short and sweet. Most of what I'd like to talk to now is just going into the Q&A session. So if I can hand back to Mark, maybe to start some of those questions.
That's great, Philip. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to everybody that submitted the questions. We've got quite a few to get through. So I won't waste any time, Philip. I'll start with the first one, which reads as follows. Given the retest of the Amungi well, which were verified by outside sources, what level of confidence is there that the flow rates can be replicated in the upcoming 1,000 meter cracks? While guidance is 2 to 3 MFCF, I'd assume that is to temper expectations. Could you elaborate?
Look. First of all, the test results you referred to in September, they were fantastic. They did confirm we had what we call a deformation in the casing, and the results, there was a calculation done that a normalized flow rate, if you didn't have the deformation over 1,000 meters, would have been in excess of 5,000 MCF a day. So based on those test results and the flow rates we got from not just one of the stages of work, but like 4 stages of the 11 that did contribute to the actual flow rate, we're extremely confident that these rates can be replicated. But it's really important to note our success case rates are in the range of 2,000 to 3,000. We're not trying to temper expectations. These are the success case rates. 5,000 rates is icing on the cake. 5,000 is possible. Yes, we could replicate it, but it's really important to know the success case is 2,000 to 3,000. Obviously, the higher up, the better it is, but 2 to 3 is what we're aiming for.
That's great, thank you. Please, can you clarify the number of wells required to carry out a reliable pilot production project?
Yeah, I guess by reliable, I presume you mean one sizable enough to support going to full-scale production. So success of this current program, we would envisage a pilot production something in the order of up to 12 wells, 2 to 3 pads, so 3 to 4 wells per pad. But more importantly, the length of those horizontal sections increasing from 1,000 meters to up to 3,000 meters. And then once we achieve the success across the pilot production plan over the 23-24 period, that then would move us towards full-scale development heading into 2025, which is obviously the bigger objective.
Thank you. Turning to the next question, if I may. We've been investors since 2011 when we invested in FALCON as our first and only since private placement. We're curious to know a projected timeframe for distribution or if there are any plans to IPO yet. In other words, what's our potential to regain on our investment?
Yeah, so for this shareholder, I presume you're a shareholder in FALCON Australia and not FALCON Canada. So the company you're in is a private company we own 98% of. We did back in 2013 offer all FALCON Australia shareholders the option to convert into FALCON Canada shares. About half the shareholders took up that offer. We don't have plans to repeat that offer. It's a rather cumbersome process and expensive process. And neither do we plan to IPO FALCON Australia. However, there's no bad news in any of that because the potential for any gain in your investment in FALCON Australia is directly linked to any gain in FALCON Canada. And you can track that by reference to the quoted share price for FALCON Canada, which you can get on the TSXV at FO.V is a ticker for that one. And ultimately, in terms of realizing a gain without an IPO, I mean, a gain for a FALCON Australia shareholder, would be triggered on a sale of FALCON Canada, and your FALCON shares in Australia would effectively get the equivalent terms to a FALCON Canada share. So there'd be no difference really.
Great, thank you. Couple of questions, I guess, around the share price. It reads as follows. I'm curious as to when the management of the company expects some upward gain in the stock price of the company. I watched over the last several years as the stock has moved between 9 and 18 cents. When do we expect 30 to 50 cents or something along those lines?
Never soon enough for you, for the management, for the board, for anyone. I mean, look, the share price performance, it's been very disappointing over the last number of years, particularly when you take into account the exceptional results of last September, the current global energy crisis, and now this really exciting work program which we're about to kick off. But if we have the kind of results that we are confident that we'll get from these two wells we're drilling this year, I think you're going to see a fundamental and permanent upward shift in the value of FALCON. So it's not tomorrow, but it's within the next 3 to 6 months, certainly.
That's great, thank you. A long question here, if I may just read it in full. It says, Philip, can you tell investors a bit more about the progress on the step-out well pad for the second Amungi horizontal well and the approximate location? I'm also wondering if the existing Amungi H1 well pad is being used for the first horizontal or whether a new well pad is being constructed just across the Carpentaria Highway. What level of confidence do you have that the actual drilling will start in September, given that the hot rig is currently in use by another E&P company in Beetaloo, and that they may extend that time for that rig? Do you have any financial estimates as yet as to what Falcon's 22% share of a 12-well pilot program may be? So a lot in there, Philip. Over to you, sir.
Thanks. Let me break it down, actually, and I think about 4 or 5 questions there. The step-out well pad, location is 10 kilometers from the Amungi well pad. The pad itself is nearing completion, but it'll be ready in plenty of time to receive that rig and the spudding, and for the spudding of the second well. So we've no issues on that. Are we using the existing? Absolutely. So the existing pad is being used for the second Amungi well. The reference on the hot rig, the rig is hot, but it is not being used by anyone at the moment. But it has been used recently and has been used in the Beetaloo, but it does not. So we're not dependent on another drilling program to expire. In fact, we are carrying out some minor modifications on it before it's being mobilized to site. That's the only thing that's holding it up from moving to site. And in terms of the cost, it's far too early to give an estimate of what that, because we haven't even designed what the pilot program would be. So it's way too early what that might cost Falcon.
Thank you. Do you expect the new Australian PM and his administration to have any negative impact on Falcon's operations in the future?
You can never be sure when it comes to politicians. But look, we don't really expect any. We have a Labour government in Northern Territory. We now have a federal Labour government, and they're pretty aligned on their vision and views for the Beetaloo and very supportive of the development of the Beetaloo. So we don't see any negative impact at all.
Thank you. When will we find out whether the Beetaloo Basin project is commercially viable or not?
Yeah. Like I said in the presentation, one of the key objectives of this current work program is to assess, the commercial viability, at least as it pertains to the Amungi member B shale. And that will be down to the flow rates we get from these two 1,000-meter horizontal wells. that we're going to be drilling and frac stimulating. So it's not a question of, certainly not a question of years, it's just down to the next 4 to 6 months. And if we can achieve the success case flow rates of 2,000 to 3,000, then it becomes more commercially viable. You know, the real test for commercial viability will be the end of the pilot production. But I think going into the pilot production, you wouldn't go in there if you didn't think it was commercially viable to begin with. So it really is down to the next 6 months.
Thank you very much indeed. A slightly longer question here. Over the last number of years, we're conditioned to believe that once commerciality was declared, that the asset would be sold. There is now a change of plan. If you could elaborate on where you see the future and how it might unfold and likely timelines. If the upcoming Amanji flow rates hit similar rates to the retest last September, would Falcon be up for sale if the right offer appeared? And what might the right offer be to tempt a sale?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. And the upfront answer to it, yes, there is a change of plan. We always had a plan about, we talked about exit. And exit was kind of, you know, our go-to kind of thing on success. Now, when you look at the kind of success we had in September last year, and you look at the fact that it really only pertains to 1/8 of our total acreage, even if we have success in the next 6 months, to sell on the back of that success, we'll be selling out way too early. You're not going to capture value, real value for the other 7/8, no matter how much success we're going to have in the next 6 months. So I think there has been a change in plan where, you know, we won't be looking and putting the for sale sign up on the back of success at the end of this year into early next year. As a public company, of course, there's always a potential for somebody to make an offer for us. But we're better off, you know, on success in the next 6 months is going into this pilot development program. And at the same time down the road, you know, seeing what we can do at the Valkyrie flank and of course the Kyella play as well. So that is a significant change in the view of the board of Falcon over the last, let's call it 6 or 9 months, and certainly since September last year.
That's great. I mean, I think we have touched on the Australian government question, but it may be a different view on it. But how will the recent change in Australian government leadership change the commitments to advance our interests? I think you may have touched on it. But
yeah, I have, and no change at all to the commitments, none whatsoever.
Perfect. Let's move on to the next question. I'm both a shareholder in Falcon and also a ORI owner in Mako in Hungary. Any chance that the dire natural gas shortage and the high oil and gas prices in Europe will incentivize Falcon to re-enter a Mako well alone or with partners?
No, we're not looking to re-enter the Mako in Hungary, not for the foreseeable future. But you know, we always remain open, as we've always done, to the possibility that someone might partner up with us. And yeah, given everything else going on, the dire natural gas shortage, that could happen. But as I said, we're not actively out looking for somebody, nor are we looking to re-enter it ourselves at the moment.
That's great. Question or statement here, I don't know which, but there's a lot of coverage in the newspapers about spot prices received for LNG shipments out of Darwin. Just wondered if you had any comments around that.
Yeah, indeed, there has been, for good reason, because those spot prices they've been hitting $30 per MCF over the last 6 months. That compares to $6 at Henry Hub. Hence, there's been a lot of talk about it. And even as we look out, what we call the JKM, the Japan-Korea marker, which is the benchmark for LNG in this part of the world, that price curve and trend is trending upwards up to $40 an MCF. So that's really, really good news for Falcon and for the development of the Beetaloo.
And I guess an extension of that, can you provide us on prices paid for term contracts for 1 year or more? And have they moved in more recent months in percentage terms as much as spot prices?
Yeah, we wouldn't have that degree of visibility on term contracts. They tend to be confidential between the various counterparties. But any term contract entered today, for example, you know, on a 20-year term, that would be well north of $10 gas. And the Beetaloo would be hugely commercial at $10. I mean, our break even estimated by the likes of UBS and others is sub $5 gas. So any contracts we're hearing about is certainly north of $10. So it's certainly in a really good place in terms of pricing.
That's great, thank you. Let's turn to the next question. What sort of premium does LNG out of Darwin achieve compared to prices in the US?
Yeah, I kind of hinted at that. You know, we're looking at, you know, $30 gas out of Darwin, $6.60 on the Henry Hub. You're looking at about a 350% premium. So that's about as healthy a premium as you're ever likely to see. So as I said, it's very, very favorable for the development of the Beetaloo.
Great. Drilling costs in the Beetaloo so far as we can see to date are higher than in the US. Can one expect these costs will begin to come down now? And if so, can you explain how the drilling companies expect to achieve this?
Yeah, the cost of drilling, early drilling in particular in a remote basin, which is 2,500 kilometers from the nearest oil field, I mean, they're significantly higher than in the US. But these costs will come down as soon as activities increase. US rig operators, and we know it, are starting now to look at Australia as rig activity in the US starts to decline. So if we have success in, and not just we, Empire and Tamboran have success in 2022, you're going to see US rig operators moving into the Beetaloo for 23 and beyond. And with them, so too will all the oil field service providers. And when that happens, that's when you'll see a dramatic reduction in costs of drilling.
Thank you. Tamboran and Santos in the last 12 months have got themselves into disputes with the landowners in the basin. To date, Origin stroke Falcon have not experienced this. Can we expect this to continue?
Yeah, the dispute you're referring to, I think, is one between Tamboran, Santos, and Rallan over land access. And you're correct, Origin hasn't experienced any similar disputes to date. And, Origin, they invest a huge amount of resources in stakeholder management in the Beetaloo over the last 8 years. We've seen that, for upfront. Their track record in stakeholder management is one of the key reasons we chose them as our partner back in 2014. And we are highly confident they'll continue to manage all stakeholders in the same proficient way and avoid any potential disputes.
That's great. Can you confirm the position at present is that we have two royalties on our 22.5% portion of the 4.6 million acres, one with the Bayliss family, 1%, and the other 2% with Mr. Sheffield?
Yep, that's largely correct. The Bayliss family it's not just the Bayliss family, it's about 4 to 5 beneficiaries of that. And they do own 1% overriding royalty. But this does amount to a total reduction from what was originally 12% privately held over, now down to 3%, which is a great result for the company, great result for us to be able to get out and develop the Beetaloo with just a 3% overriding royalty and not what was there up to 2-3 years ago, as high as 12%.
That's great. And there is a follow-on to that. Can you confirm, too, that Origin has now only the 1% royalty with the Bayliss family, which I think we've just...
Origin would have had similar call options as to Falcon available to them. They could have exercised, and by doing that, they would have reduced their RE down to 1%. But I'm not privy to whether they did or didn't, so I can't confirm that they've exercised all of the call options, but it certainly would have made sense for them to do so.
That's great. Well, halfway through the pre-submitted questions, Philip, so if I may, I'll crack on through the second half. The first of which reads as follows: how do Falcon's royalties compare to those of Tamboran, Santos, and Empire?
Well, in Tamboran's case, I know from the 2021 prospectus that they have a range of REs very similar to what we had back, when I came on board here in 2012, and they have call options in place to reduce them over time for various, payments. Not too dissimilar to what we had. I don't have an inside knowledge into what royalties might exist at Empire or Santos. But yeah, similar. Tamboran is pretty much similar to what we had.
Thank you very much indeed. Has there been any indication that there might be a differential pricing for Beetaloo gas sold internally, e.g. to the East Coast, and supplies shipped overseas?
Yeah, look, gas, it's priced differently depending on what market you go, what route you go. There's a whole host of factors to take into account when looking at pricing. The length of pipeline, associated tariff on a different pipeline. If you're going an LNG route, you're looking at liquefaction, shipping, degasification costs. Whatever it ends up being, Falcon will always look to sell its 22.5% share of Beetaloo gas into the highest market. And the great thing is we own the molecules at the end of the day. So it is up to Falcon to determine where those molecules go. We don't have to go with where Origin decide to take the gas, for example, to their APLNG project on the East Coast. We can decide to take our share of the gas, 22.5% of the molecules. We can take that to the highest market. So it's wherever we find the best price is where we'll take our gas.
Great, thank you. Has any agreement been reached in principle that an initial quantity of Beetaloo gas must be sold to internal users in the first few years before any export tails as a quid pro quo for federal government infrastructure assistance?
Short answer is no. But look, there'll always be talk around what they call a domestic gas reservation policy. particularly when you consider the fact that Australia is the largest exporter of LNG in the world, and at the same time, it's short gas. So one might ask, how could this even be allowed to happen? But the simple answer is that without 25-year export contracts being put in place when these projects were being developed, they would never have been developed. However, the Beetaloo, it's an onshore gas field, so there's a very good chance of being onshore that some of this gas will find its way into the domestic market anyway, and without any great need for federal government intervention. But as I say, the short answer to your question is we haven't seen any indication yet on a quid pro quo for federal government's infrastructure assistance. So we're pretty good.
That's great. Thank you. Congratulations to Anne Flynn, and congratulations to Joe Nally and Tom Lehman for coming on board. Anne's contribution is very welcome and very clear, but can you enlighten everyone here this afternoon where you see Joe and Tom making the most contribution to the company over the next couple of years?
Yeah, thank you for this question. And I can certainly agree with your sentiments with regards to Anne, and thank you for that. We're very fortunate to have both Joe and more recently Tom join the board. And I did put these questions to them at the AGM, which they were on the call at the time. So let me maybe read out the answers from Tom and then from Joe when I put those questions to them. So Tom's answer was, my role as an independent director is to help the CEO, CFO, and the rest of the board achieve Falcon's goals. I have extensive oil and gas industry experience, including over 20 years working several US shale plays, including the Barnett, Marcellus, and the Utica plays, from the exploration and appraisal phases through to full field development. In the near term, I am providing technical and business advice to the Falcon team regarding the 2022 appraisal program. Longer term, my experience with large capital programs will hopefully be of use in Falcon's strategy development as the Beetaloo ramps up to become a world-class producing basin. Finally, I think that my experience working for large public E&P companies for over 30 years will allow me to help to guide the executive team to meet their objectives and fulfill their responsibilities to the shareholders. So that was Tom's answer to that question when it was put to him at the AGM last week. Similarly, Joe was asked the same question and answered, having helped the company fund itself over the last number of years as its corporate stockbroker, I agreed to take the role of chairman on take on the role of chairman on my retirement from the City of London. Given the comfortable financial position of the company that it is now in, funding is not an issue at the moment. I see my role as using my connections in assisting management in helping to monetize our Beetaloo asset by strategic partnership to enable us to stay into the early development phase, which would produce a multiple return to shareholders from their present position. So I think, hopefully that answers that shareholder's question.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Philip. Can one assume Falcon works closely now with Santos, Empire, and Tamboran?
Yeah, I talk regularly to the guys at Empire Tamboran, less so to the people at Santos. The key guy at Santos actually now works over at Tamboran, so we still have good connections to all. More importantly, Origin, as our operator, they have a very good working relationship with all of the operators in the Beetaloo, and there's now both formal and informal relationships between all parties, because everyone knows success, and importantly, the speed of success will depend a lot on the level of collaboration between all parties. And this is something that Origin and Falcon, together, particularly with Tom Lehman and a number of other companies, are now very actively engaging in.
Thank you very much indeed. We did a lot of work last year, and although not part of this year's programme, I understand time was going to be spent this year going through the results on Kiela in order to assist if we were going to go back to it at a future time. Can you share with us this afternoon if these studies have yielded new insights? Yeah,
Origin, they have carried out a lot of studies. They continue to do this work. For shareholders listening in today that are relatively new to Falcon, and as a general reminder, we successfully drilled a 1,600-meter lateral section into the liquids-rich Kiela formation, and we fracked and flow tested at rates of up to 1,500 MCF a day. And on the back of that, we did issue a notification of discovery way back in January 2021. However, we did encounter issues of saline fluid coming back up the wellbore, which impeded the flow of gas. And the studies have shown that the lower Kiela, it has higher than average TOC values. It has good porosity. It has very good permeability averages, and it's a wet gas condensate. So in our view, all of these properties confirm that the lower Kiela has the geological and geochemical characteristics comparable to several unconventional systems in North America.
Great, thank you. Any chance of another Kiela well in 2023, or will funds be directed to a better understood and more predictable formation?
We'd love to get back to drill another well at the Kiela simply because it has enormous potential. But I think the answer to your question lies in the question itself. As we progress this year's program, together with separate programs of Tambourine and Empire, all targeting the Emungi Member B shale, we will gain an even better understanding of the predictable formation. And this, no question, but this will remain the focus for Origin and Falcon through to the pilot production plan. So yes, we're going to stick with, as I said, the Emungi Member B shale.
Thank you very much indeed. Turning to the next question, will 2023 programme consist of a second Valkyrie flank well?
Again, I give a similar answer to the last question. We'd love to get back to the Valkyrie flank, where we really had excellent results from our first exploration well. But our focus for the next couple of years, it has to be the Emungi Member B shale. In the meantime, we'll look very closely across at Empire's flow test results coming out by the end of August. We can learn a lot from theirs. And then, we can plan targeting a well. I wouldn't rule it out for 2023, to be honest, because the results we've got today were so good. And, we're hopeful that Empire will have equally good results on their Carpentry well in the next 6 weeks or so. So I wouldn't rule it out, but it's not top of our list to go after in 23. It's the pilot development program we really want to go after. If there's rig availability, resource availability, yes, we could do it, but maybe it's a 24 well.
Thank you. Might our 2022 programme be altered in the next month or two if exceptional figures come through for Tambourin's Maverick well and Empire's drilling programme?
Absolutely not. Look, we're really, really excited about our programme. Success amongst our neighbours, it'll just add to the excitement. But we won't have results in time to alter anything anyway, even if we wanted to. So that there's going to be no change to our program. Our program is fixed, and it's a really good program. It's a robust program, and it's not to be changed at any stage. So.
Thank you. Is there any progress on South Africa? Surely, given the greater interest from European countries in African oil and gas, one might see some prospect of South Africa putting together a proper strategy.
Yeah, good timing on this question. So thanks. As a reminder to shareholders, Falcon has a technical cooperation permit over a huge 7 million acres in the Karoo Basin in South Africa. But we've been waiting over 10 years to be awarded an exploration permit. The granting of this has been delayed due to the fact that the regulatory framework pertaining to the exploration and production of onshore oil and gas is just not in place. And then last week, the government published new regulations governing that same work. And it's now going through a short period of public consultation. And hopefully we'll see these new regs being signed off by Parliament, which will then eventually pave the way for the granting of an exploration permit. But we've been here before. Maybe we're here now for the last time. So maybe this side of Christmas, we might get a nice Santa Claus present and get our exploration permits finally.
That's great. Thank you. What's your view on how global markets will be impacted if Russia turns off its gas to European countries?
I think 3 words sums that up. Security of supply. That's what's going to be at the forefront of every country's minds going into winter 2022. It's just going to become the key issue for everyone. Countries that can turn back on their coal-fired power stations have already started to do so. Take a look at Germany. Gas, it's going to be in high demand across all of Europe, and there'll be increased demand for gas going into Asia, which will increase prices even further. We see this as an absolutely huge opportunity for Falcon, as countries such as Japan, Thailand, Taiwan, Korea, and many more will be looking to Australia to secure even more gas. In fact, only last week, Japan's industry minister, he was on a 5-day trip to Australia, and he pleading with the Australians to increase their LNG production because it's trying to protect its energy supplies after Russia seized control of the Sakhalin 2, which is one of the major sources of LNG going into Japan. And Japan, as you know, it shut down all its nuclear facilities back some years ago. It has no desire to turn those back on again. So it's heavily dependent, as is most of Southeast Asia, heavily dependent on gas. So security of supply is going to become the key focus for everyone, wherever they can get it. And it really puts the Beetaloo in a wonderful place, given our connected way into playing the Southeast Asian market through Darwin and out through LNG exports. So It's good news for Falcon. It's not good news for world energy, but nonetheless, we'll take the positives from it.
Thank you. Is it too early to comment on where we might focus in 2023?
Definitely not. I mean, 23, it's only a few months away. But like I said, we have the success from this year's drilling program. We've been moving into the next phase, targeting the Emungi member dry gas play with this multi-well program in 23-24. So that's what our focus is going to be.
Lovely. What is the time for the 2 1-kilometer horizontals, and is there enough time left this year to get both new wells drilled and fracked before year end, with the 60-day flow testing running into the new year?
Yeah, that kind of about sums up where we are. We expect to spud the first of the 2 wells in early September, allow 45 days to drill each in between a rig move. We should be able to complete both wells by the end of the year. Fracking will be run, immediately those wells are completed, and then flow testing, most likely won't commence until early January. So it'll really be that January phase when you're looking for those big numbers in terms of the flow rates themselves. But we're not weather dependent. We're right bang slap next to the highway, so we don't have weather issues that we can't move resources in and out of the area. So we can operate all through the wet season if it does come to that. But yeah, we're on target to complete the drilling this year and then get the flow test going as early as we can in January.
That's great. And the next question really around the hot rig and whether the rig is now on site for the first 1 kilometer horizontal, and if not, when will it be on site?
Yeah, I touched on a bit on the hot rig earlier, and for other shareholders listening today, the reference to a hot rig is an important one because it refers to a rig that, it's been in recent operation, whereas a cold rig has been lying idle in a yard in 150 or 250 pieces, and you put it all back together again and mobilize it to site. But look, I can confirm, Origin is using a hot rig. It's a rig that has recently been operating in the Beetaloo, not currently operating, but has been operating in the Beetaloo. And it'll come with some of the crew that operated its most recent drilling activity. The timing, as I said, is just going through some final modifications. It'll be mobilized to site in plenty of time for the spudding of this first well in September.
Thank you. What can you say about the 2023 pilot production plan?
It'll probably be, well, first of all, it won't be a 23. It'll be 23/24. I think I've touched on it. It's going to be, hopefully up to 12 wells. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 9, 10, but certainly, up to 12 wells over 2 to 3 pads. It's too early to get into any specifics at this stage. But the great news is that once we confirm our success case of 2 to 3 million scuffs of gas a day, we will be moving into the pilot development program. No more exploration, no more appraisal. Success case flow rates means pilot development, and again, more critically, targeting the Emungi member B shell. So then we can move into kind of full-scale development as we go into 2025.
Thank you. What are the overall plans for capitalizing on the Beetaloo permits, and what might that timing look like?
Yeah, this touches on a question asked earlier. The overall plans, for capitalizing the Beetaloo, it's shifted a bit since our fantastic results in September 21 when we retested the Emungi well. We always, as I said, we talked about the exit strategy, which is always a viable option, but it's no longer considered the only option. I think that's the key difference. Success with this current drilling program would lead to a pilot production plan, and that would have a significant change in the valuation of the Beetaloo. Success, it'll also attract attention of potential suitors who may look to acquire Falcon. However, our potential success, no matter how fantastic it is, it won't capture value for the entire 4.6 million acres should we look, to do an exit in 2023. And it's unlikely, acquirer would pay full value for the 8/8. They wouldn't pay full value for what we really like at Valkyrie 76 or for the Kayela play. So our overall plans for capitalizing the Beetaloo has to include looking to bring in a strategic investor, that could see us capturing more of the value over the entire 4.6 million acres rather than setting out too soon.
Thank you. And what's your understanding of what might happen under Canadian law with our largest shareholder's shareholding in the next year or so?
So by the largest shareholder, you're obviously referring to La Mesa Holdings, whose ultimate beneficial shareholder is Victor Vekselberg. So we put out a press release on the 23rd of March. We detailed the full position with regard to this shareholding, given the fact that the US imposed sanctions on Mr. Vekselberg back in April 2018. Nothing has changed since that PR. But at the end of the day, it's actually not a matter for Canadian law. Lemessia is a shareholder in Falcon. It's afforded the exact same status and legal entitlements under Canadian law as any and every other shareholder, and I don't think that's ever going to change. So there's no issue there in terms of Canadian law with regard to our largest shareholder at all.
Well, great. You'll be pleased to hear, Philip. That's the end of my voice asking you questions. I guess everyone else might be relieved as well. But thank you to all of those that took time to pre-submit the questions ahead of today's event. And as you can see, Philip, there's a number of questions that have come in. And apologies if some of those may be duplicated as they came in perhaps before some of the final questions were submitted to you. But if I may, can I just ask you to open up the Q&A tab and read out the questions and give a response where it's appropriate to do so. And of course, anything we can cover that if we don't have time, we can cover and present.
Okay, will do. And thank you for all these questions. If I start with the first one, is where does the pilot program come from? We were to prove and sell. So I think I've answered that our change in strategy is you're not going to capture value by prove and sell, as in get these results in 22 and sell in Q1 23. That's where we talk about going into this pilot development program. Second question, when is the seismic getting started? Imminently. Is all I can say there. It will be going ahead very soon. Next question. I've noticed a large increase in dilution. We now are at 1.04 billion shares. Is the company considering a reverse split at some point? Why have insiders not bought up more shares of institutions? So reverse split is something that is very tricky. Reverse split means, what we call it in our part of the world, consolidation, where you might do 1 for 100 and have your shares outstanding down to 10 million rather than 1 billion. And your share price goes to, $3 instead of 30 cents. But that's very tricky to play with because your $3 can become $2.50 an awful lot quicker than your 30 cents becoming 25, or not 30 cents, but 12 cents. So it's something you could only ever do when you've got, real momentum going forward and a real momentum story going forward for the foreseeable future. We've looked at it time and time again as the questions come up from shareholders over the last several years, given the number of shares we have outstanding. So we're not looking at it anytime in the near future in terms of a reverse split. Insiders, myself, the board, we bought shares back. I think it was the end of the year or the first week in January was the last time. I think everyone on the board, bought shares, including Anne, who was just CFO at that time. Next one, I've been a shareholder since 2009. You mentioned a permanent shift in share price next 3 to 6. What kind, how much should a permanent shift would you expect? Whatever I expect, it'll never happen, is the simple answer there. Look, we are massively undervalued at 12, 13, 14, 15 cents, or anyway up to 30 cents. We're still massively undervalued. Success here, at the 2 to 3 million scuffs of gas per day, you are going to see a multiple increase in that share price, a lot of activity, a lot more shareholders coming into Falcon, and that's why I think it's going to be permanent. It's not just going to be a blip, for 1 week in January 2023. And you also got, the added benefit of everybody else around us, Tambourine and Empire, hopefully coming out with positive results. Can I see the share price go to 30, 40 cents in the back of these results? I'd love to see it. I don't see why it shouldn't. I mean, we've been there before with nothing like this going for us. And now you look at the energy market and the pricing dynamic and everything else and the activity around us, we've never, ever been in a better place than we are right now. So success here now should really materialize into a significant and permanent shift in the share price. Next one, do we see any negative input in the next 180-day program by environmental protesting? Will it slow it down? No. I mean, look, you'll always have environmentals protesting. We do everything by the book, as do Origin. They're the operator. We have all our permits and approvals in place. We have all our stakeholder engagement fully on board. So no, there's nothing there that's going to slow us down. I mean, the moratorium we had up 2016 is done and dusted. It's not coming back. And we're, sticking with those recommendations from the that moratorium, from the Pepper inquiry. So I don't see anything like that slowing us down. Why isn't Falcon buying back shares for a few millions to do something for the share price? So buying back shares would be using, our own resources, which are better deployed for future investment in the Beetaloo rather than buying back shares. we did, as I said, a board of management bought shares, as a vote of confidence back in, I think it was done at like 8 pence or slightly higher than 8 pence back around early January. We are very confident in this company, but no, we don't plan to do any further purchases, nor does Falcon itself. A corporate buying back shares is not on the agenda. And then I see a question here: is there any talk of a windfall profits tax in Australia, given the run-up in gas prices? Yeah, we saw that in the UK recently. I haven't heard anything of the kind in Australia yet, is the answer to that. Next one from Ulrich. Any more comments on the under-sanctioned status of your largest shareholder, Lamesa, due to the Russian invasion? Is your backing away from the one-stated objective of monetized related to the situation with your major shareholder? As I understand it, Lamesa making any money from Beetaloo isn't acceptable to the Australian government. So look, we put out a full detailed press release in March. Nothing has changed since then at all. The shares have been in Lamesa. They've been, Victor Vexelberg has been under sanction since 2018. His shares through Lamesa that hold a shareholding in Falcon, they've been quarantined. And since that date, those shares haven't been able to vote those shares since 2018 at the AGM. So it's kind of a benign shareholding. If, for example, and by the way, there's no connection with the shareholding at all in terms of backing away from our one stated objective of monetizing. There's no connection whatsoever. If we were to sell the company, as I understand it, any proceeds from the shareholding held by Lamesa will go back to that same entity that currently holds those shares in quarantine, so that Victor Vexelberg cannot derive any benefit from the sale of Falcon shares. And this is something that's been looked at by the Australian government and signed off on accordingly based on everything they've seen and know about that shareholding. So there's no issue there at all. It's, as I said, it's a benign shareholding. It is what it is. But like I said, under Canadian law, they are a shareholder, no different from any other shareholder. Nothing has been said about funding. When does the carry end? Good question. Nothing has been said about funding. We are fairly funded. We've got over $17 million in the bank. 10 million of that came in the form of Brian Sheffield in early April this year. Which is, as I said, a welcome addition to our share register. Our carry runs out. Our carry was, started back in 2014. So we've had a pretty good run since 2014, and here we are, we're still carried. We got an additional uplift in the carry of about 150 million at the beginning of COVID. But that carry won't last forever. It'll certainly have been exhausted before we finish this current program. So between now and the end of this program, that carry will be exhausted, and then we'll be paying our own way. But the reason we don't talk about raising money or funding is because we don't need to. So we have 17 million, and even with the end of the carry, that won't impact a huge amount on the 17 million. Not at least for the next 6 to 9 or 12 months. At what share price do you plan to raise money for the drilling program 23? Pass. No idea whether I'll raise money or bring in a strategic partner or what the share price might be. We would, as I said, if we're going into a 23 program, there's no question we're going to have a massive increase in our share price because, as I said, we'll only go into the 23 drilling program on that success case flow rates of 2 to 3 million. And if we have those kind of flow rates, that will translate into a much higher valuation and a higher share price for Falcon.
Philip, as you can see, you've answered every single question from investors, both that pre-submitted and came in during the live event. So thank you once again to everybody for your engagement. Philip, I know that investor feedback will be particularly important to you and to the company, and I'll shortly redirect investors on the call to give you their thoughts and expectations. But I wondered before doing so, if I may, Philip, just ask you for a few closing comments, and then I'll send investors to give you their feedback.
Yeah, look, thanks, Mark. My closing comment really is thanks to you all for attending, but particularly thanks to you all for your questions. That's what makes hosting this session with Investor Meet really worthwhile, is getting all of those questions from you. Some of them came in advance, which is great. And it's great to be able to then, share those answers with you. My final comment, whether you pick it up or not, I've never, ever been more excited about Falcon and the Beetaloo than I am right now. And there's lots and lots of great reasons for that. We are really excited about the program. We're really excited about all the macro issues going on around us. Our timing could not have been better. We have a great board, great additions to our board. As I said, we're well funded. We've got this great new addition to the share register. Our success is never guaranteed, but as I said, I've never felt more optimistic, more excited about the prospects for the company than I am today. So I wish us all good luck.
That's great, Philip. Thank you very much indeed. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can really better understand your views and expectations. This may take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Falcon Oil and Gas, we'd like to thank you for attending this afternoon's presentation. That concludes today's session, and may I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon.